All right, let's dive right into this explainer and discover how the greatest mythological war in literature was actually sparked by real Bronze Age geopolitics. For centuries, the tale of a legendary city besieged by a massive fleet of Greek warriors was thought to be pure fiction. You know the story: angry gods, invincible heroes, and a giant wooden horse. But what if I told you that buried beneath thousands of years of poetic embellishment, there's a very real historical foundation? Today, we're going to look at the archaeological and historical records that turn the myth of Troy into the gritty geopolitical reality of a late Bronze Age city. Here is our roadmap for today. 1. The epic legend of Troy. 2. Searching for the truth. 3. Wilusa, the real Troy. 4. The actual Bronze Age conflict. And 5. How history became myth. Section 1. The epic legend of Troy. To set the stage, let's quickly run through our mythical roster of heroes who fought in this fabled 10-year siege, mostly famously detailed in Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. On the Greek side, we've got King Agamemnon commanding the forces, alongside his brother Menelaus. There's the nearly invincible Achilles, the incredibly cunning Odysseus, and of course, Helen. Defending the great walled city of Troy, we have King Priam and his sons, the brave commander Hector, the younger prince Paris, and the royal descendant Aeneas, who legend says managed to survive the city's eventual destruction. So, the absolute crux of the myth is that this massive, decade-long bloodbath was fundamentally a war over love and, well, a little divine intervention. The story goes that the goddess Aphrodite promised Helen to Paris. When Paris took Helen back to Troy, her husband Menelaus was absolutely infuriated. He enlisted Agamemnon, who gathered 100,000 men and over 1,100 ships to cross the Mediterranean. This was literally the face that launched 1,000 ships. It's an incredibly romantic and deeply tragic origin story for a war. And that sets up the legendary climax perfectly. After 10 agonizing years of bloody skirmishes outside the impregnable city walls, hero duels, and constant meddling by the Greek gods, the Greeks finally end the stalemate. They use Odysseus' deceptive master plan. They build a giant wooden horse, hide elite soldiers inside, and fake a full retreat. The Trojans, thinking they've actually won, bring the horse inside the walls. That night, the Greeks slip out, open the gates for their returning army, and Troy is completely and utterly destroyed. Section 2. Searching for the truth. Now, for hundreds of years, everyone just assumed this epic tale was pure fiction, just a brilliant piece of poetry. But this brings us to the pivotal question of our explainer: did the Trojan War actually happen? Is there a real historical foundation buried beneath these myths of gods and heroes? Were the great woes of Troy real, or just a convenient, dramatic backdrop for ancient Greek storytellers? Well, the answer shifted from pure fiction to historical possibility in the late 19th century. A German businessman and amateur archaeologist named Heinrich Schliemann led an excavation at a site called Hisarlik in modern-day Turkey, and he uncovered actual archaeological ruins of a heavily fortified city. Even more astonishing, the archaeological layers showed this city was violently destroyed around 1250 BCE, which perfectly matches the fabled approximate timeline for the destruction of Troy. But here's the catch: what historians call the problem of sources. Historical Troy at Hisarlik was destroyed in the 13th or 12th century BCE, but Homer didn't write the Iliad until the 9th or 8th century BCE. That is a massive gap of 400 to 500 years. Homer was relying entirely on generations of oral storytelling, not primary historical accounts. This means the myth is essentially a giant game of telephone played over centuries before someone finally wrote it down. Section 3. Wilusa, the real Troy. So if Troy was real, to find out what actually happened, we have to look past the Greeks. We need to check the records of the dominant superpower in Anatolia at the time, the Hittite Empire. Through some incredible linguistic bridging, first proposed back in 1924, experts connected the Greek names directly to Hittite cuneiform records. The Homeric Greek name for the city, Wilios, which later became Ilios like in the Iliad, perfectly matches the Hittite name for a Western Anatolian city-state called Wilusa. And the Greek term Troia? It perfectly matches the Hittite regional name Taruisa. We aren't just looking at similar locations, we are looking at the exact same places spoken in different ancient languages. And the historical Hittite documents offer some breathtaking aha moments that perfectly map onto the Greek myth. Homer refers to the Greeks as the Achaeans. In Hittite records, the aggressive Western maritime power is called the Ahayawa. In the myth, Prince Paris of Troy is also famously known as Alexander. Well, in the Hittite records, there's a real Walusan king named Alak-Sa-Du who signed a treaty around 1300 BC. And the god who guarantees that treaty? Apollonius, a direct match for the Greek god Apollo who fiercely defended Troy in the Iliad. It is absolutely mind-blowing when you put them side by side. Section 4. The actual Bronze Age conflict. Okay, so if we know the real players, what were they actually fighting over? Spoiler alert, it definitely wasn't a kidnapped queen. Unlike the myth, Velusa, our historical Troy, wasn't this solitary fortress taking on the Greek world all by itself. It was a strategic vassal state caught firmly in the political web of the mighty Hittite Empire. Local rulers like King Alexandru signed treaties obligating them to provide soldiers and intelligence to the Hittites, and in return, the Hittites would protect their claim to the throne. It was all about regional hegemony and controlling vital trade routes in western Anatolia. The historical reality of the conflict breaks down into a massive geopolitical chess match. The Hittite Empire is just trying to maintain control over Walusa. Meanwhile, the Ahiyawa, our Homeric Greeks, are acting as a hostile rival power. But instead of launching a massive unified fleet, the Ahiyawa actively backed local warlords, like a guy named Piamaradu, to destabilize Hittite control. They were essentially fighting a series of proxy wars to topple pro-Hittite kings in the region. If we trace the actual kings of Walusa along this timeline, you can literally watch this political instability unfold. Around 1350 BC, King Kakani maintains peace. By 1300 BC, King Alak-Sa-Du is signing strict treaties to secure his throne. But look at 1250 BC, right when the archaeological site of Troy was violently destroyed. We have a Hittite text called the Miliwakata letter revealing that the Walusan king Walmu was suddenly deposed and forced to seek Hittite asylum. The Hittite king Tudaliah IV actually had to intervene to try to reinstate him amidst all this Ahayawan or Greek interference. Section 5. How history became myth. So how exactly does a complex political chess match of treaties and warlords transform into a wildly romanticized epic? Let's demythologize the conflict by comparing them side by side. History was driven by the cold, hard realities of vassal treaties, control of lucrative Aegean trade routes, and regional warlords fighting for power. But as these events were passed down through generations of oral storytelling, those complex politics were slowly romanticized. Let's be honest, a proxy war over a trade route just isn't as catchy around a campfire as a tale of divine intervention by Aphrodite, a beautiful kidnapped queen, and a heroic duel to the death. The absolute biggest takeaway here is that Homer's Iliad isn't the literal historical record of one specific, massive 10-year siege. It's an amalgamation. It's the brilliant distillation of many smaller rebellions, proxy wars, and skirmishes between the Mycenaean Greeks and the Hittite Empire's vassals, condensed over centuries of oral tradition into a single masterpiece of Greek mythology. The real Troy, Walusa, did exist, and it certainly did suffer at the hands of the Greeks, just not quite how the poets remembered it. I want to leave you with this provocative thought to ponder as we wrap up this explainer today. If a series of localized Bronze Age rebellions and trade disputes could be transformed into a 3,000-year-old epic of vengeful gods, a kidnapped queen, and a hollow wooden horse, how will our history be mythologized millennia from now? What modern political conflicts are currently being flattened into the legends of our distant future? Keep questioning the stories you're told.